Detective Marcus Webb looked at his watch. It was almost 9 in the evening. The streets were quiet except for a few cars passing by. He sat in his police car outside Tony's bar waiting. This was not part of his regular patrol. This was something else entirely. Webb had been a cop for 15 years. He started with good intentions like most officers do. He wanted to help people and make the streets safer. But somewhere along the way things changed. The pay was never enough. His wife left him 2 years ago, taking half of everything he owned. His teenage daughter barely spoke to him anymore. Bills kept piling up and his police salary could not cover them all. That's when Rico Martinez approached him 6 months ago. Rico was not just any street dealer. He ran a large drug operation in the city. He had money, connections, and most importantly, he had information. Rico made Webb an offer that seemed too good to refuse. "I need someone on the inside," Rico had said during their first secret meeting. "Someone who can tell me when the police are planning raids. Someone who can make certain evidence disappear. In return, I will pay you more money than you make in 6 months." Webb knew it was wrong. He knew he was crossing a line that he could never uncross. But the money was too tempting. His first payment was $10,000 in cash. It was more money than he had seen at one time in years. After that, it became easier to justify each decision. Tonight was supposed to be a routine exchange. Rico would give him information about a rival dealer, and Webb would receive his monthly payment. It was a system that had worked perfectly for 6 months. Webb would get cash and Rico would get protection from police raids. A black car pulled up across the street. Webb recognized it immediately. It was Rico's car, but something felt different tonight. Rico usually came alone or with just one person. Tonight there were 3 men in the car. Webb's phone buzzed. It was a text from Rico. "Change of plans. Meet me behind the bar in 5 minutes." Webb frowned. They never met behind the bar. Their usual spot was the parking lot of a closed gas station 2 blocks away. But he needed the money. His rent was due tomorrow and his bank account was almost empty. He got out of his police car and walked around the building. The alley behind Tony's bar was dark and narrow. Garbage bins lined one side and the brick wall of another building formed the other side. It was not a place where anyone would want to spend time. Rico was already there, leaning against the wall. He was a tall, thin man in his 30s with several tattoos on his arms. He always dressed well, tonight wearing an expensive leather jacket and gold chain. "You're late," Rico said, not looking at Webb. "I'm exactly on time," Webb replied. "What's with the new location?" Rico smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. "I had some problems with my usual spot. Too many people watching." Webb felt uneasy. In all their previous meetings, Rico had been relaxed and confident. Tonight he seemed nervous, constantly looking around as if expecting trouble. "Do you have my payment?" Webb asked, wanting to get this over with quickly. Rico reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. "It's all here. 5,000 as usual." Webb took the envelope without counting it. He trusted Rico to pay the right amount, but as he was putting the envelope in his coat pocket, he heard footsteps at the entrance of the alley. 2 men appeared from around the corner. They were not Rico's usual associates. These men looked different. They were in better shape, moved with purpose, and had a military bearing that Webb recognized immediately. The first man was tall with short brown hair and serious eyes. He looked to be in his early 30s and had the build of someone who spent a lot of time working out. The second man was slightly shorter but equally fit, with black hair and alert eyes that seemed to take in everything around him. Both men were wearing casual clothes, but Webb could tell they were military. He had seen enough soldiers and sailors over the years to recognize the way they carried themselves. They walked with confidence and awareness that came from training. Rico saw them too and immediately tensed up. "Who are these guys?" he whispered to Webb. Webb did not know, but he did not like the situation. 2 unknown men showing up during a secret meeting was never a good thing. His hand moved instinctively toward his service weapon. The taller man spoke first. "Sorry to interrupt. We're just looking for a way back to the main street." His voice was calm and polite, but his eyes were taking in every detail of the scene. Webb could see him looking at Rico, then at the envelope that was still partially visible in Webb's hand. "Main Street is that way," Rico said quickly, pointing toward the other end of the alley. "Just keep walking straight." But the 2 men did not move immediately. The shorter one was looking directly at Webb now, and Webb could see recognition in his eyes. The man knew he was a police officer, probably from his posture and the way his jacket hung over his gun. "Thanks," the shorter man said, but instead of leaving, he seemed to be studying the scene more carefully. Webb realized these men had seen the envelope exchange. They had witnessed him taking money from Rico, a known drug dealer. This was exactly the kind of situation he had hoped to avoid. "Is everything okay here?" the taller man asked, his voice still polite but with an edge of authority. Webb's mind raced. He needed to get control of the situation quickly. As a police officer, he had authority over civilians. He could order them to leave. But something about these two men made him hesitate. They did not seem like ordinary civilians who would be easily intimidated. "Everything's fine," Webb said, trying to sound confident. "Police business. You need to move along." The two men looked at each other. There was some kind of silent communication between them, the way partners develop after working together for a long time. "Of course, officer," the taller man said. "We'll be on our way." But as they started to leave, the shorter man pulled out his phone. Webb could see him opening what looked like a camera app. The man was trying to be subtle about it, but Webb noticed. This was getting dangerous. These two had seen too much, and now one of them was trying to document it. Webb had to make a decision quickly. He could let them go and hope they would not report what they saw, or he could take action to protect himself. Rico was getting more nervous by the minute. "We need to go," he whispered to Webb. "This doesn't feel right." Webb agreed, but it was too late now. The two military-looking men had seen the money exchange. They knew he was a corrupt cop, even if they did not know all the details. His carefully built system was in danger of falling apart because of two strangers who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. As the men walked away, Webb made a decision that would change everything. He would not let two witnesses destroy the life he had built. He would find a way to protect himself, no matter what it took. But first he needed to know who these men were and what they planned to do with what they had seen. The corrupt detective's world was about to become much more complicated than he ever imagined. Webb spent the entire night thinking about the two men who had seen him with Rico. He could not sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces. The way they looked at him. The way the shorter one tried to take a photo. They knew something was wrong, and that made them dangerous. The next morning, Webb arrived at the police station early. He had a plan, but he needed to move quickly. First, he had to find out who those men were. He started by checking the license plates of cars that had been parked near Tony's bar the night before. The bar's security cameras might have caught something. He called the bar owner, Jimmy Torres, who he had helped with some legal problems in the past. Jimmy owed him a favor. "I need to see your security footage from last night," Webb told him over the phone. "Sure thing, detective. What time you looking for?" "Around 9 p.m., there was an incident in the alley behind your place. I'll have it ready for you in an hour." Webb drove to the bar and reviewed the footage. There it was, clear as day. A red pickup truck parked on the street with two men getting out. The camera caught their faces clearly. More importantly, it caught their license plate number. Back at the station, Webb ran the plate through the police database. The truck was registered to Jake Morrison, age 28, with an address across town. A quick background check revealed something that made Webb's blood run cold. Jake Morrison was a petty officer in the United States Navy, stationed at the nearby naval base. Worse yet, he was a Navy SEAL. "Great," Webb muttered to himself. "Just great." He dug deeper into Morrison's record. The man was clean. No arrests, no traffic violations, nothing. His military record was impressive too. Multiple commendations, overseas deployments, specialized training. This was exactly the kind of person whose word would be believed over a street cop with a questionable reputation. But Webb was not done yet. He needed to know about the second man too. He looked at the footage again, studying the shorter man's face. Then he had an idea. If Morrison was a SEAL, chances were good that his companion was military too. SEALs often hung out together when off duty. Webb called a contact at the naval base, Sergeant Mike Phillips. Phillips worked in base security and sometimes shared information with local police. They had worked together on a few cases involving military personnel. "Mike, I need a favor," Webb said when Phillips answered. "I'm looking for information about a Navy SEAL named Jake Morrison. I think he was with another service member last night, and I need to identify him." "What's this about?" Phillips asked. "Possible drug activity. I can't say much more right now." There was a pause. Give me Morrison's full name and service number if you have it. Webb provided the information from his background check. 20 minutes later, Phillips called back. Morrison's partner last night was probably Alex Rivera, Phillips said. They're both in the same SEAL team and are known to spend time together off base. Rivera is a chief petty officer, been in longer than Morrison, also has a spotless record. 2 Navy SEALs with perfect records. This was getting worse by the minute. Webb thanked Phillips and hung up. He sat at his desk, staring at the information he had gathered. These were not ordinary witnesses. These were highly trained military personnel, who were used to observing details and remembering them accurately. But Webb had not survived 15 years as a cop, including the last 6 months as a corrupt one, without learning how to handle difficult situations. If he could not intimidate these men or make them disappear, he would have to find another way to protect himself. He thought about his options. He could try to convince them to stay quiet, but that was risky. They had no reason to trust him, and approaching them directly would only confirm their suspicions. He could try to discredit them somehow, but their military records made that difficult. Then another idea came to him. What if he could turn the situation around completely? Instead of being the criminal they witnessed, what if he could make them the criminals? It was a dangerous plan, but it might be his only option. Webb had done this before, though never with military personnel. A few years ago, he had planted drugs on a man who had witnessed him taking a bribe from a gambling operation. The man had no credibility after being arrested for drug possession, and his testimony became worthless. The key was making it believable. The planted evidence had to make sense, and Webb had to have a plausible reason for stopping them in the first place. But if he could pull it off, the 2 SEALs would become the suspects instead of the witnesses. Webb spent the rest of the day planning. He obtained a small bag of cocaine from the police evidence locker. It was supposed to be destroyed, but Webb had made sure it ended up in his possession instead. He had used planted evidence before and always kept some available for emergencies. The next step was finding the right opportunity. He could not just randomly stop Morrison and Rivera on the street. He needed a legitimate reason that would hold up in court. A traffic violation would work perfectly. That evening, Webb positioned himself near the naval base. He knew Morrison and Rivera would eventually leave the base and drive home. He had their addresses from his background check. Morrison lived in an apartment complex about 10 miles from the base. Rivera lived in a house on the other side of town. At 7:30 p.m., Webb spotted Morrison's red pickup truck leaving the base. Perfect timing. Webb followed at a distance, waiting for the right moment. He needed Morrison to commit some minor traffic violation that would justify a stop. 5 minutes later, Morrison rolled through a stop sign without coming to a complete stop. It was a minor violation that most cops would ignore, but it gave Webb the legal justification he needed. Webb turned on his lights and pulled Morrison over in the parking lot of a shopping center. As the truck stopped, Webb could see 2 figures inside. Both Morrison and Rivera were in the vehicle, just as he had hoped. Webb got out of his police car and approached the truck. His heart was beating fast, but he had to stay calm and professional. This had to look like a routine traffic stop. Morrison rolled down his window. "Good evening, officer." "Was I speeding?" "You failed to come to a complete stop at the intersection back there," Webb said, shining his flashlight into the truck. He could see both men clearly now. They were the same 2 from the alley behind Tony's bar. "I'm sorry about that," Morrison said politely. "I thought I stopped." "License and registration, please." Morrison handed over his documents. Webb examined them carefully, taking his time. He needed to create an opportunity to plant the drugs without being seen. "I need you both to step out of the vehicle," Webb said. "Is that necessary for a traffic violation?" Rivera asked. It was the first time the shorter man had spoken. His voice was calm but questioning. "Standard procedure when there are multiple occupants," Webb lied. "Please step out of the vehicle." Both men got out of the truck. Webb could see they were not happy about it, but they were cooperating. They stood near the back of the truck while Webb pretended to examine Morrison's documents more carefully. "Wait here," Webb told them. "I'm going to run your license through our system." Webb walked back to his police car, but instead of getting inside, he approached Morrison's truck from the opposite side. The 2 men could not see him clearly from where they were standing. Quickly, he opened the passenger door and slipped the small bag of cocaine under the seat. It took less than 10 seconds. Webb returned to the two men. "I'm going to need to search your vehicle," he announced. "Search it for what?" Morrison asked. "This is just a traffic stop." "I smell marijuana," Webb lied. "So that gives me probable cause to search for illegal substances." Rivera stepped forward. "Officer, we're both active duty military. We don't use drugs. You can test us right now if you want." "That's what they all say," Webb replied. He was committed now. There was no turning back. Webb went to the truck and began searching. He made sure to look in several places before discovering the cocaine under the passenger seat. "Well, well," he said loudly, holding up the bag. "What do we have here?" Both men stared at the bag in shock. "That's not ours," Morrison said immediately. "We've never seen that before," Rivera added. Webb smiled. It was exactly the response he had expected. "You have the right to remain silent." As Webb began reading them their Miranda rights, Rivera pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is a setup," Rivera said to his phone. "This officer is planting evidence." Webb immediately grabbed for the phone. "You're interfering with a police investigation." "That's obstruction of justice." A struggle ensued over the phone. Webb was bigger than Rivera, but the SEAL was in better shape and had been trained in hand-to-hand combat. Other shoppers in the parking lot began to notice the commotion. "Alex, don't fight him," Morrison called out. "We'll handle this the right way." Rivera stopped struggling and let Webb take his phone. But the damage was already done. The phone had been recording for almost a minute, capturing Webb's behavior and their protests of innocence. Webb arrested both men on charges of drug possession and obstruction of justice. As he handcuffed them, he felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. His plan had worked, but he knew this was just the beginning. These were not ordinary criminals he was dealing with. They were Navy SEALs, and they would not go down without a fight. What Webb did not know was that he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. He had no... The call came at 11:30 p.m., just as Admiral Sarah Chen was finishing her evening report in her office at Naval Special Warfare Command. She had been expecting to head home soon, but the voice on the other end of the phone changed everything. "Admiral, this is Commander Jackson at the base legal office. We have a situation involving 2 of your SEALs. They've been arrested by local police on drug charges." Admiral Chen sat up straight in her chair. "Which SEALs?" "Petty Officer Jake Morrison and Chief Petty Officer Alex Rivera from Team 7. Chen knew both men personally. She had reviewed their files many times and had even awarded Rivera a commendation medal just 6 months ago. The idea that either of them would be involved with drugs was impossible to believe. "What are the details?" she asked. Commander Jackson explained what little information he had. A traffic stop, a search, drugs found in their vehicle, both men arrested and taken to the county jail. The charges were drug possession and obstruction of justice. "This doesn't make sense," Chen said. "Morrison and Rivera are 2 of our best. Their records are spotless. They both passed drug tests just last month." "That's what I thought too, Admiral. But the arresting officer claims he found cocaine in their truck." Chen had been in the Navy for 25 years. She had started as a junior officer and worked her way up through dedication, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to her sailors. She had seen enough of the world to know that good people sometimes made bad decisions, but she also knew when something smelled wrong. Who was the arresting officer? Detective Marcus Webb from the City Police Department. Chen made a note of the name. "I want you to call the best military defense attorney we have. Get them down to the jail right now." "Morrison and Rivera are not to say anything without legal counsel present." "Already done, Admiral. Attorney Rodriguez is on her way." "Good. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Chen hung up the phone and sat back in her chair for a moment. She had learned long ago to trust her instincts, and right now her instincts were telling her that something was very wrong with this situation. 2 exemplary SEALs with perfect records suddenly arrested for drugs? The timing was suspicious and the circumstances even more so. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door. As she walked to her car, she called her chief of staff. "Captain Williams. Tom, I need you to start a background investigation on a city police detective named Marcus Webb. I want to know everything about him by tomorrow morning. Financial records, arrest statistics, complaints against him, everything." "What's this about, Admiral?" Chen explained the situation as she drove toward the county jail. "I don't believe Morrison and Rivera are guilty of these charges. Someone is setting them up, and I want to know who and why. I'll get our intelligence people on it right away." The county jail was a grim, gray building downtown. Chen had been there before on other occasions involving military personnel, but never for something like this. She parked and walked through the front entrance, her uniform immediately attracting attention from everyone in the lobby. The desk sergeant, a tired-looking man in his 50s, looked up as she approached. "Can I help you, Admiral? I'm here about 2 of my sailors who were arrested tonight. Jake Morrison and Alex Rivera." "Yes, ma'am. They're being processed right now. Their attorney arrived about 20 minutes ago." "I want to see them." The sergeant hesitated. "I'm not sure that's possible right now. They're still being booked." Chen's voice became firm but controlled. "Sergeant, those men are under my command. They are active-duty military personnel and I have a responsibility for their welfare. I will see them now." The authority in her voice was unmistakable. The sergeant nodded quickly and picked up his phone. "I'll see what I can do." 10 minutes later, Chen was sitting in a small conference room with Morrison, Rivera, and their attorney, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. Both SEALs looked tired and frustrated, but they stood at attention when she entered. "Sit down," Chen said. "Tell me exactly what happened." Morrison spoke first, describing the events of the evening. The traffic stop, the search, the planted drugs, Rivera's attempt to record the incident. His account was detailed and consistent, the kind of precise reporting she would expect from a trained SEAL. Rivera added his perspective, focusing on Detective Webb's behavior during the arrest. "Admiral, I've been in combat situations where my life depended on reading people correctly. This officer was lying from the moment he approached our vehicle. His story about smelling marijuana was false. The drugs were planted." Attorney Rodriguez had been taking notes throughout their account. "Admiral, I've reviewed the arrest report. There are several inconsistencies in Detective Webb's statement. The timeline doesn't add up, and his justification for the search seems questionable." Chen listened carefully to everything they said. Her 25 years of experience told her that these men were telling the truth. Their stories matched perfectly. Their body language was consistent with innocent people who had been wronged, and most importantly, their character and past behavior supported their claims. "What about the phone recording?" Chen asked. Rivera's expression darkened. "Webb took my phone after I started recording. He claimed it was evidence, but I think he just wanted to destroy the video." "The phone is in police custody," Rodriguez added. "We'll need to get a court order to examine it." Chen made several mental notes. The phone recording could be crucial evidence, but only if it still existed. She would not put it past a corrupt cop to delete or destroy evidence that could expose him. "I want you both to know that you have the full support of Naval Special Warfare Command," Chen told them. "We will not let false charges destroy your careers or your lives." "But I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything at all that you haven't told me?" Both men looked at each other, then back at her. Morrison spoke first. "Admiral, there is one thing. The night before our arrest, Alex and I witnessed something that might be relevant." Chen leaned forward. "What did you witness?" Rivera described the scene behind Tony's bar. The meeting between Detective Webb and a man who appeared to be a drug dealer. The exchange of money. Their attempt to leave quietly, but Webb's obvious recognition that they had seen something they shouldn't have. "You witnessed Detective Webb taking money from a drug dealer?" Chen asked. "Yes, ma'am. It was clearly some kind of payoff or bribe." The pieces were starting to fall into place in Chen's mind. Webb was corrupt. Morrison and Rivera had witnessed his corruption. Now Webb was trying to discredit them by making them look like criminals themselves. It was a classic tactic, but it required careful planning and execution. "Why didn't you report what you saw immediately?" Chen asked. Morrison answered. "We discussed it, Admiral. We were going to report it through proper channels the next morning. We wanted to make sure we had all the facts straight before making such a serious accusation against a police officer." Chen nodded. It was exactly what she would have expected from professional military personnel. Unlike civilians who might act impulsively, these men understood the importance of following proper procedures and having solid evidence before making accusations. "Attorney Rodriguez, I want you to file a motion first thing in the morning to examine Rivera's phone. If there's video evidence of Webb's behavior during the arrest, we need to see it immediately." "Already planned, Admiral." "Good. I also want you to request a change of venue if possible. We need to get this case in front of a judge who won't be influenced by local police politics." Chen turned back to Morrison and Rivera. "You two are going to be released on your own recognizance tonight. Report to my office at 0800 tomorrow morning. We're going to fight this with everything we have." As she prepared to leave, Chen's phone buzzed with a text message from Captain Williams. Initial background check on Webb complete. Multiple red flags. Call me ASAP. Chen excused herself and stepped into the hallway to call Williams. What did you find? Admiral, Detective Webb has some serious problems. Financial troubles, recent divorce, complaints from other officers about his conduct. More importantly, there have been 3 other cases in the past year where military personnel were arrested by Webb on questionable charges. 3 other cases? Yes, ma'am. In each case, the charges were eventually dropped or reduced significantly. But the pattern is clear. Webb seems to have a problem with military personnel. Chen felt her anger rising. This was not just about Morrison and Rivera anymore. This was about a pattern of abuse by a corrupt police officer who was targeting members of the military. I want a full investigation into all of Webb's arrests, involving military personnel in the past 2 years. I also want financial records, phone records, and surveillance footage from around Tony's bar for the night Morrison and Rivera witnessed the meeting. I'll need some help from other agencies for that level of investigation. You'll have it. I'm calling the Naval Criminal Investigative Service first thing in the morning. This is now a federal investigation. Chen returned to the conference room where Morrison and Rivera were finishing their paperwork. Gentlemen, you need to understand something. This is bigger than just your case. Detective Webb appears to be systematically targeting military personnel. You may have been his victims, but you're also the key to stopping him. Admiral Chen arrived at her office at 6 a.m., 2 hours before her scheduled meeting with Morrison and Rivera. She had barely slept, her mind racing with plans and possibilities. The coffee was already brewing when Captain Williams knocked on her door. Tom, please tell me you have good news, she said as he entered with a thick folder. It's even better than I hoped, Admiral. Detective Webb's background is a goldmine of corruption indicators. Williams spread several documents across her desk. Let's start with his finances. Webb's salary is $65,000 a year, but his bank records show deposits totaling over $200,000 in the past 12 months. Chen studied the bank statements. These extra deposits, are they regular? Monthly, like clockwork? Always cash deposits, always in round numbers. $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Classic signs of bribery or extortion payments. What about his arrest record? Williams pulled out another set of documents. This is where it gets really interesting. Webb has made 47 arrests in the past year involving drugs. That's 3 times higher than any other detective in his department. High arrest numbers aren't necessarily suspicious. No, but this is. Of those 47 arrests, 32 were either dismissed, reduced to minor charges, or resulted in plea bargains for very light sentences. It's like he's arresting people he knows are innocent, or he's making deals to let real criminals go free. Chen felt her anger growing. What about the military personnel cases you mentioned? 3 cases in 18 months, all following a similar pattern. Williams pulled out 3 file folders. First case, Marine Corporal James Wilson, arrested for drug possession after Webb claimed to smell marijuana during a routine traffic stop. Drugs were found in Wilson's car, but the Marine claimed they were planted. Case was eventually dismissed due to procedural errors in the search. Procedural errors? Webb forgot to turn on his body camera. No video evidence of the search or arrest. Chen made a note. What about the second case? Navy Petty Officer Linda Hayes, arrested for drug possession and disturbing the peace outside a nightclub. Hayes claimed Webb planted evidence and used excessive force. Her attorney discovered that Webb's report contained false information about the time and location of the arrest. And the third case? Army Sergeant Robert Chen, no relation to you, Admiral, arrested for drug possession during what Webb called a suspicious person stop. Chen was in uniform walking home from the base. Webb claimed Chen was acting nervous and gave him permission to search his backpack. Drugs were found. Chen claimed they were planted. Admiral Chen leaned back in her chair. The pattern was clear and disturbing. Let me guess, Chen's case was also dismissed? Reduced to a minor disorderly conduct charge. But Admiral, there's more. I contacted all 3 of these service members yesterday. They all agreed to speak with us. What did they say? They all described Webb the same way. Aggressive, dishonest, seemed to enjoy humiliating military personnel. And here's the kicker. All 3 remember Webb making comments about how military people think they're better than everyone else. Chen stood up and walked to her window overlooking the naval base. Hundreds of sailors and officers were arriving for their morning duties. Good people who served their country with honor. The idea that a corrupt police officer was specifically targeting them made her blood boil. Tom, I want you to contact the Naval Criminal Investigative Service immediately. This is now a federal investigation. Webb is systematically targeting military personnel, and that's a federal crime. Already done, Admiral. Agent Sarah Martinez from NCIS will be here at 10 a.m. There was another knock on the door. Chief Petty Officer Davidson, Chen's aide, entered with an urgent expression. Admiral, I have the preliminary report on the Tony's bar surveillance footage. Chen had requested that her intelligence team obtain any available surveillance footage from the area around Tony's bar for the night. Morrison and Rivera witnessed Webb's meeting with the drug dealer. What did you find? The bar's rear security camera was mysteriously broken that night, Admiral. But we found something even better. Davidson placed a tablet on Chen's desk and pressed play. This is from a traffic camera 1 block away. The timestamp shows 9:15 p.m. on the night in question. The video was grainy but clear enough. It showed Webb's police car parked near Tony's bar, much earlier than his official patrol log indicated he was in that area. This proves Webb lied about his location that night, Williams said. It gets better, Davidson continued. He advanced the video to show a black sedan pulling up near the bar. We ran the license plate on this car. It's registered to Ricardo Martinez, known locally as Rico. He's been arrested 4 times for drug trafficking but never convicted. Never convicted? That's right, Admiral. And guess which detective was involved in 3 of those 4 arrests? Chen did not need to guess. Marcus Webb. Exactly. Webb arrests Rico multiple times, but somehow Rico never goes to jail. It's the perfect setup for a protection racket. Chen studied the video footage more carefully. Can we see Webb and Rico actually meeting? Not directly, Admiral. The alley behind the bar isn't visible from this angle. But we can see both of their vehicles in the area at the same time, which contradicts Webb's patrol log that says he was on the other side of town. Captain Williams pulled out another document. Admiral, there's something else. I had our financial people analyze Webb's bank deposits more carefully. The timing of his cash deposits corresponds exactly with major drug arrests in the city. What do you mean? Every time there's a big drug bust, Webb gets a large cash deposit within 48 hours. It's like he's being paid for advance warning about police operations. The pieces of Webb's corruption were falling into place like a jigsaw puzzle. He was taking money from drug dealers in exchange for protection. He was tipping them off about raids. When that wasn't enough, he was arresting innocent people, especially military personnel, to keep his arrest numbers high and deflect suspicion. Davidson, what about Rivera's phone? Any word on the recording he made during the arrest? That's a problem, Admiral. The phone is in police custody, but Webb's department claims the phone was damaged during the arrest and the memory was corrupted. Chen's jaw tightened. How convenient. Let me guess, the corruption happened after Rivera started recording, but before he could upload the video anywhere. That's what they're claiming. But our tech people think there might be ways to recover deleted or corrupted data, even from a damaged phone. Make it happen. I want our best computer forensics team working on this. At 8 a.m. sharp, Morrison and Rivera arrived at Chen's office. Both men looked better than they had the night before, but Chen could see the stress in their faces. Being arrested and charged with serious crimes was not something that happened to career military personnel very often. Gentlemen, sit down. I have some updates for you. Chen explained everything her team had discovered about Webb's corruption, his pattern of targeting military personnel, and the evidence they were gathering. She could see both men becoming more confident as she spoke. Admiral, does this mean the charges against us will be dropped? Morrison asked. I can't promise that yet, but I can tell you that we're building a strong case that you were framed. The question is whether we can prove it in court. Rivera leaned forward. What about the video I recorded? Webb took my phone. They claim the phone was damaged and the video was corrupted, but we have our own tech experts working on it. If that video still exists anywhere on your phone, we'll find it. Chen pulled out a legal pad with notes she had been making. I need you both to think carefully about Webb's behavior during the arrest. Every detail matters. How did he approach your vehicle? What did he say? How did he conduct the search? What was his demeanor? Morrison and Rivera spent the next hour going through the arrest step by step. Their military training showed in their ability to recall precise details and maintain consistency in their accounts. One thing that struck me as odd, Rivera said, was how quickly he found the drugs. Most searches take time, especially if you're really looking for hidden contraband. Webb went straight to the passenger seat like he knew exactly where to look. Because he knew exactly where he had planted them, Williams added. Chen made another note. What about other witnesses? Was anyone else in the parking lot? There were other people around, Morrison replied. Some shoppers, people going to and from the stores. A few of them stopped to watch when the situation got heated. We need to find those witnesses. Tom, I want investigators canvassing that shopping center. Someone might have seen Webb planting the drugs or heard our men's protests of innocence. There was another knock on the door. Agent Martinez from NCIS had arrived early. Admiral Chen, I'm Special Agent Martinez. I understand you have some serious allegations against a local police detective. Agent Martinez was a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. Chen had worked with NCIS before and knew they were thorough investigators. Agent Martinez, thank you for coming. Detective Marcus Webb is systematically targeting military personnel with false arrests. We believe he's being paid by drug dealers to protect their operations and arrest innocent people to inflate his statistics. Chen spent 30 minutes briefing Martinez on everything they had discovered. The agent took. Detective Marcus Webb sat in his apartment, staring at the morning news on his television. The story about the arrested Navy SEALs had made the local headlines, but the coverage was not going the way he had hoped. Instead of focusing on the drug charges, reporters were asking questions about the arrest itself. Webb's phone rang. It was his supervising lieutenant, Karen Brooks. Webb, get down here immediately. We need to talk. What's this about? Just get here now. The tone in her voice told Webb that something was wrong. He had been a cop long enough to recognize when trouble was coming. He dressed quickly and drove to the police station, his mind racing through possible problems. Lieutenant Brooks was waiting for him in her office along with Captain Davis, the head of the detective division. This was not a good sign. Captain Davis only got involved when there were serious problems. Sit down, Webb, Brooks said coldly. Marcus, we've been getting calls about your arrest of those 2 sailors, Captain Davis began. Questions about your procedures, your justification for the search, your handling of evidence. Webb tried to stay calm. It was a clean arrest, Captain. I followed all proper procedures. Did you? Because the Navy is claiming their people were set up. They're saying you planted drugs in their vehicle. That's ridiculous. Why would I do that? Brooks leaned forward. That's what we want to know, Marcus. Your arrest report has some inconsistencies. The timeline doesn't match your patrol log. Your justification for the search seems questionable. Webb felt sweat forming on his forehead. I smelled marijuana. That gave me probable cause to search. Both suspects passed drug tests at their base just 2 weeks ago, Captain Davis said. They have spotless military records. No history of drug use or criminal activity. Yet you're telling us they suddenly decided to drive around with cocaine in their truck? People make bad decisions, Captain. Being in the military doesn't make someone automatically innocent. Brooks pulled out a file folder. Marcus, this is your 4th arrest of military personnel in the past 18 months. That's unusual for a detective who usually works financial crimes and burglary cases. Webb's heart started beating faster. He had hoped no one would notice the pattern. I arrest criminals where I find them. I don't care if they're military or not. That's interesting, Captain Davis said, because we've had complaints from other military personnel about your conduct during arrests. They claim you seem to enjoy humiliating people in uniform. Those are false accusations from people who were angry about being arrested. Brooks and Davis looked at each other. Webb could see they were not convinced by his explanations. Marcus, Internal Affairs is opening an investigation into your recent arrests, Captain Davis said. Until that investigation is complete, you're on administrative leave. What? You can't do that! We just did. Turn in your badge and gun. You're not to have any contact with witnesses or evidence related to your pending cases. Webb felt panic rising in his chest. Administrative leave meant they suspected him of wrongdoing. Worse, it meant he could not control the investigation or influence witnesses. Captain, I've been a good cop for 15 years. My arrest record speaks for itself. That's exactly what we're worried about, Marcus. Webb had no choice but to turn in his badge and service weapon. As he cleaned out his desk, he could feel other officers watching him. Word traveled fast in a police station, and everyone would know about his suspension within hours. Outside the station, Webb sat in his car trying to think. His carefully constructed world was falling apart rapidly. The Navy was investigating him. Internal Affairs was investigating him, and now he was suspended from duty. He needed help, and he needed it quickly. He called his lawyer, Robert Sterling. Sterling was expensive but effective, the kind of attorney who specialized in defending police officers accused of misconduct. "Bob, I need to see you immediately. I'm in serious trouble." "What kind of trouble?" "False accusations, planted evidence claims, internal affairs investigation." "The works." There was a pause. "Come to my office. Don't talk to anyone else about this case." Sterling's office was in an expensive downtown building. The lawyer was a heavy-set man in his 50s who had made a career out of defending cops who had crossed the line. His office walls were covered with photos of him shaking hands with police chiefs and politicians. "Tell me everything," Sterling said after Webb sat down. Webb explained the situation, being careful to leave out any mention of his arrangement with Rico Martinez. He portrayed himself as a dedicated detective who was being railroaded by powerful military interests. "So these Navy SEALs are claiming you planted drugs in their vehicle?" "That's what they're saying." "It's completely false, of course." Sterling made notes as Webb talked. "What evidence do they have to support their claims?" "Nothing concrete. One of them tried to record the arrest with his phone, but the phone was damaged during the struggle." "Damaged how?" Webb hesitated. "It might have been dropped during the arrest. The screen was cracked and the memory was corrupted." Sterling looked up from his notes. "Marcus, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there any evidence on that phone that could hurt your case?" "I don't think so. Like I said, the memory was corrupted, and that's not what I asked. Could there be evidence on that phone that would support their claims?" Webb met his lawyer's eyes. "No, absolutely not." Sterling nodded, but Webb could tell the lawyer was not entirely convinced. Good defense attorneys learn to read their clients, and Sterling had probably seen enough corrupt cops to recognize the signs. "Here's what's going to happen," Sterling said. "The military and probably federal agencies are going to investigate every aspect of your career. They'll look at your finances, your arrest record, your personal life. They'll interview every person you've ever arrested and every witness to your arrests." Webb felt sick. "What should I do?" "First, you say nothing to anyone without me present. Second, we need to start building a defense that portrays you as a dedicated officer who is being targeted by powerful interests that want to protect military personnel from legitimate law enforcement." "What? About the corruption allegations?" "What corruption allegations?" "As far as I know, you're facing false accusations about planted evidence. Nothing else." Sterling was fishing, trying to find out if there were other problems he needed to know about. Webb decided to stick with his story. "That's right. Just the false accusations from the two sailors." "Good. Now we need to think about how to handle the media. This story is already getting attention, and we need to control the narrative." Sterling pulled out a press release he had apparently already prepared. "I'm going to issue a statement saying that Detective Webb is the victim of a coordinated attack by military officials who want to protect their personnel from legitimate law enforcement actions." Webb read the statement. It painted him as a hero cop who was being persecuted for doing his job. It claimed the Navy was using its influence to intimidate local police and prevent military personnel from being held accountable for their crimes. This is good, but will people believe it? Some will. The key is to create doubt about the Navy's motives. We'll argue that military officials are protecting their people regardless of guilt or innocence. Sterling made several phone calls while Webb waited. The lawyer had contacts at local newspapers and television stations. Within an hour, he had arranged for Webb to be interviewed by a friendly reporter who was known for supporting police officers. "Remember, you're the victim here," Sterling coached him. "You were just doing your job when you were attacked by powerful military interests. You're a dedicated cop with 15 years of service who is being railroaded by people who think military personnel should be above the law." The interview took place that afternoon at Sterling's office. The reporter, Mike Harrison, was known for his pro-police stance and his skepticism of military influence in civilian affairs. "Detective Webb, you're facing serious accusations from the Navy. How do you respond?" "Mike, I've been a police officer for 15 years. I've made hundreds of arrests, and I've always followed proper procedures. These accusations are completely false and are being driven by military officials who think their people should be immune from civilian law enforcement. The Navy claims you planted drugs in these sailors' vehicle. Why would you do that? I wouldn't, and I didn't. I found illegal drugs during a legitimate search of their vehicle. Now the Navy is using its political influence to try to discredit me and protect their personnel. What about claims that you've targeted military personnel in other cases? I arrest criminals where I find them. I don't care if they're in the military or not, but it seems like the Navy wants special treatment for their people. The interview continued for 20 minutes, with Webb portraying himself as a victim of military arrogance and political pressure. Harrison's questions were sympathetic, focusing on Webb's service record and the difficulty of being a police officer in today's environment. After the interview, Sterling seemed satisfied. That was good. We've planted the seed that this is about military privilege rather than police corruption. But Webb knew the interview was just the beginning. The Navy and federal investigators would not be discouraged by a single media appearance. They had resources and determination that far exceeded anything Webb could marshal in his defense. The courthouse was packed on the morning the trial began. News cameras lined the street outside, and reporters pushed forward trying to get statements from anyone connected to the case. This had become much more than a simple drug possession trial. It was now a battle between the military and civilian law enforcement. With national media attention focused on the small city courthouse, Jake Morrison and Alex Rivera sat at the defense table with their attorney, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. Both men wore their dress blue uniforms, their ribbons and decorations clearly visible to the jury. Admiral Chen had suggested they wear civilian clothes to avoid appearing to use their military status, but Rodriguez disagreed. The jury needs to see who these men really are, Rodriguez had argued. They need to understand that these are not street criminals but decorated military personnel with impeccable records. Across the aisle, Detective Marcus Webb sat with his lawyer, Robert Sterling. Webb was dressed in his best suit, trying to project the image of a dedicated police officer who was being wrongfully accused. Sterling had coached him extensively on his appearance and demeanor. Look confident but not arrogant, Sterling had told him. You're a victim here, remember that. The prosecutor was District Attorney Maria Santos, a woman in her 40s who had built her reputation on taking on difficult corruption cases. She had been hesitant to prosecute the case at first, given Webb's 15-year record as a police officer. But the evidence Admiral Chen and the federal investigators had gathered was too strong to ignore. Judge Robert Harrison called the court to order. He was an older man with gray hair and a reputation for running a fair but strict courtroom. He had presided over several high-profile cases involving police misconduct, and both sides knew he would not be easily influenced by politics or media pressure. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Judge Harrison said, this case involves serious allegations on both sides. The defendants are charged with drug possession and obstruction of justice. However, they claim the charges are false and that evidence was planted by the arresting officer. Your job is to determine the truth based on the evidence presented. District Attorney Santos stood to deliver her opening statement. She was a skilled prosecutor who knew how to present complex cases to juries in simple, understandable terms. Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about corruption and abuse of power. Detective Marcus Webb planted drugs in these men's vehicle because they witnessed him taking a bribe from a known drug dealer. When honest citizens see corruption, they should be protected, not persecuted. Instead, Detective Webb used his badge and his authority to destroy 2 innocent men's lives. Santos walked over to Morrison and Rivera's table. These men are Navy SEALs. They have served their country with honor in combat zones around the world. They have clean records, they passed drug tests just weeks before their arrest, and they have never been in trouble with the law. Yet Detective Webb wants you to believe they suddenly decided to drive around with cocaine in their truck. She turned to face the jury. The evidence will show that Detective Webb has a pattern of targeting military personnel. The evidence will show that he has unexplained income that far exceeds his police salary. The evidence will show that he lied about the circumstances of this arrest and planted evidence to frame innocent men. Santos returned to her table. At the end of this trial, I will ask you to find these defendants not guilty, because they are innocent victims of a corrupt police officer who abused his power. Sterling rose for his opening statement. He was a skilled defense attorney who specialized in defending police officers, and he knew how to appeal to jurors' natural tendency to support law enforcement. Ladies and gentlemen, Detective Webb is a dedicated police officer with 15 years of faithful service to this community. He has made hundreds of arrests and has always conducted himself professionally and ethically. These accusations are nothing more than a desperate attempt by wealthy, powerful military officials to protect their personnel from legitimate law enforcement. Sterling walked to the center of the courtroom. The prosecution wants you to believe that Detective Webb risked his career and his freedom to frame two strangers for no reason. That makes no sense. What makes sense is that these two defendants were caught with illegal drugs and are now using their military connections to avoid responsibility. He pointed toward Morrison and Rivera. These men may be heroes on the battlefield, but that doesn't make them immune from civilian laws. Detective Webb found drugs in their vehicle during a legitimate search, and now they're claiming it was all a setup because they don't want to face the consequences of their actions. Sterling's voice became more emotional. This case is really about whether we're going to allow military officials to intimidate local police officers who are just trying to do their jobs. Detective Webb deserves your support, not your condemnation. The first witness was Webb himself. Sterling had decided to put him on the stand early, hoping to establish his credibility before the prosecution presented their evidence against him. Webb testified about his 15 years as a police officer, his arrest record, and his dedication to law enforcement. He described the traffic stop in detail, explaining how he had observed Morrison's truck rolling through a stop sign and decided to make a routine traffic stop. I approached the vehicle and immediately smelled a strong odor of marijuana, Webb testified. That gave me probable cause to search the vehicle for illegal substances. What did you find during your search? Sterling asked. I found a bag containing what appeared to be cocaine under the passenger seat. How did the defendants react? They became very agitated and claimed the drugs were not theirs. One of them started recording with his phone and became physically resistant when I tried to secure the evidence. Sterling walked Webb through the entire arrest, painting a picture of a professional police officer dealing with uncooperative suspects who were trying to avoid responsibility for their crimes. District Attorney Santos began her cross-examination by focusing on Webb's financial situation. Detective Webb, what is your annual salary as a police officer? $65,000. Yet your bank records show deposits totaling over $200,000 in the past year. Can you explain that? Webb shifted uncomfortably. I do some part-time security work. I also received an inheritance from my grandmother. Santos pulled out a document. I have a copy of your grandmother's will. She left you $5,000, not $50,000. Where did the rest of this money come from? Various sources. Overtime pay, consulting work. Detective Webb, you've made 47 drug-related arrests in the past year. That's 3 times higher than any other detective in your department. How do you explain that unusual success rate? I work harder than most detectives. I spend more time on the street. Santos moved closer to the witness stand. Of those 47 arrests, 32 were either dismissed or resulted in very light sentences. Doesn't that suggest there were problems with your arrests? Webb became defensive. I can't control what prosecutors and judges do with my cases after I make the arrests. Or maybe it suggests that you were arresting innocent people? That's not true. Santos spent 2 hours cross-examining Webb, systematically attacking his credibility and exposing inconsistencies in his testimony. She showed that his patrol log for the night of the arrest did not match his testimony about his location. She demonstrated that his report contained factual errors about the time and circumstances of the traffic stop. The most damaging moment came when Santos played the partially recovered video from Rivera's phone. The courthouse audio system amplified Rivera's voice clearly. This is a setup. This officer is planting evidence. Detective Webb, we can clearly hear Mr. Rivera saying you were planting evidence. How do you explain that? He was lying, trying to create a false narrative to get out of trouble. But he said it while you were still searching the vehicle, before you had allegedly found the drugs. How could he know to claim evidence was being planted unless he saw you planting it? Webb had no good answer. The video clip was damaging, even though most of the recording had been corrupted. The prosecution called several witnesses over the next 2 days. Agent Martinez from NCIS testified about the pattern of Webb's arrests targeting military personnel. Financial expert testified about Webb's unexplained income. Surveillance footage showed Webb's police car near Tony's bar at a time that contradicted his official patrol log. Most importantly, they called the 3 other military personnel who had been arrested by Webb under suspicious circumstances. Marine Corporal Wilson, Navy Petty Officer Hayes, and Army Sergeant Chen all testified about their experiences with Webb. Their stories were remarkably similar, describing an aggressive officer who seemed to enjoy humiliating military personnel and who made arrests under questionable circumstances. Sterling fought back by calling character witnesses for Webb, including other police officers who testified about his professionalism and dedication. He argued that the military witnesses were coordinating their stories and that federal investigators had pressured them to make false accusations, but the defense was undermined when Sterling called Webb's supervisor, Lieutenant Brooks, expecting her to support her detective. Instead, Brooks testified that the third day of the trial began with an unusual tension in the courtroom. Word had spread that the prosecution had a surprise witness, someone who had not been listed in their original witness statements. Defense attorney Sterling had objected vigorously, but Judge Harrison allowed the late addition after reviewing the evidence in his chambers. Detective Webb sat at the defense table, his confidence from the first day completely gone. The past 2 days had been devastating. His testimony had been picked apart, his credibility destroyed, and witness after witness had painted a picture of a corrupt officer who targeted military personnel. But he still believed he could survive this. Juries sometimes overlooked evidence when they supported police officers. District Attorney Santos stood to call her next witness. Your Honor, the prosecution calls Admiral Sarah Chen. A murmur went through the packed courtroom. Everyone knew Admiral Chen was the commanding officer of the 2 defendants, but no one expected her to testify personally. Military officers rarely took the stand in civilian criminal cases. The courthouse doors at the back of the room opened, and Admiral Chen entered. She was wearing her full-dress blue uniform, with every ribbon, medal, and decoration perfectly positioned. The gold braids on her sleeves caught the light as she walked down the center aisle with the bearing and confidence that came from 25 years of military leadership. The entire courtroom fell silent. Even the reporters stopped taking notes and simply stared. Admiral Chen's presence filled the room with an authority that was impossible to ignore. Her uniform represented not just her personal achievements, but the power and honor of the United States Navy. Detective Webb felt his stomach drop. He had known this woman was investigating him, but seeing her in person in full uniform, walking toward the witness stand with absolute confidence, made him realize how much trouble he was really in. This was not just about 2 arrested sailors anymore. This was about institutional integrity and justice at the highest level. The jury watched in fascination as Admiral Chen approached the witness stand. Her uniform told a story of distinguished service. The ribbons included combat decorations, leadership awards, and commendations for excellence. This was clearly someone who had dedicated her life to serving her country with honor. Judge Harrison administered the oath, and Admiral Chen's voice was clear and strong as she swore to tell the truth. When she sat down, every person in the courtroom was focused entirely on her. District Attorney Santos began her questioning. Admiral Chen, please tell the jury about your background and current position. I am a Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. I have served for 25 years in various capacities, including combat deployments and command positions. I currently serve as the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Command, which oversees all Navy SEAL operations on the West Coast. How long have you known the defendants? Petty Officer Morrison and Chief Petty Officer Rivera? I have known both men for 3 years. They serve in SEAL Team 7 under my command. Santos walked closer to the witness stand. Admiral, what is your assessment of these men's character and service records? Admiral Chen's voice remained steady and professional. Both men are exemplary sailors. Petty Officer Morrison has completed 2 combat deployments with distinction. Chief Petty Officer Rivera has completed 4 combat deployments and has been recommended for promotion twice. Both men have spotless disciplinary records and have never failed a drug test. In your professional opinion, based on your 25 years of experience evaluating military personnel, is it likely that these men would possess illegal drugs? Sterling jumped up. Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation. Judge Harrison considered the objection. I'll allow it. The witness is qualified to give an expert opinion on the character and reliability of military personnel under her command. Admiral Chen turned toward the jury. Based on my extensive experience and personal knowledge of these men, it is absolutely impossible that they would voluntarily possess illegal drugs. They understand that drug use would end their military careers and destroy everything they have worked for. More importantly, their character and values make such behavior completely inconsistent with who they are as people. Santos continued her questioning. Admiral, did you personally investigate the circumstances of this arrest? Yes, I did. When I learned that 2 of my best sailors had been arrested on drug charges, I immediately launched a comprehensive investigation using all available resources. What did your investigation reveal? Admiral Chen pulled out a thick folder from her briefcase. Our investigation revealed extensive evidence of corruption by Detective Webb, financial records showing unexplained income, a pattern of targeting military personnel, surveillance footage contradicting his official reports, and witness testimony indicating systematic abuse of power. Santos asked Admiral Chen to walk through the evidence methodically. For the next hour, Admiral Chen presented a devastating case against Webb. She spoke with the authority of someone who was used to briefing senior military commanders and government officials. Her presentation was clear, organized, and completely convincing. Admiral, did your investigation reveal any connection between Detective Webb and known criminals? Yes. Our investigation showed that Detective Webb has been receiving regular payments from Ricardo Martinez, a known drug dealer. Surveillance footage shows them meeting secretly on multiple occasions. Sterling objected repeatedly, but Judge Harrison allowed most of Admiral Chen's testimony. The evidence had been properly gathered and documented, and Admiral Chen's military rank gave her testimony significant credibility. The most powerful moment came when Santos asked Admiral Chen about the impact of the false arrest on Morrison and Rivera. Admiral, how have these charges affected the defendants? For the first time, Admiral Chen's professional composure showed a hint of emotion. These are men who have risked their lives for their country. They have served with honor in the most dangerous situations our military faces. To see them handcuffed and charged with crimes they did not commit, by someone who swore an oath to protect and serve, is deeply disturbing. She turned to look directly at Webb. Detective Webb did not just attack 2 individual sailors. He attacked the institution they represent and the values they have sworn to defend. The courtroom was completely silent. Admiral Chen's words carried the moral authority of someone who had dedicated her life to service and honor. The contrast between her dignity and Webb's increasingly desperate appearance was stark and obvious to everyone present. Sterling began his cross-examination by trying to suggest that Admiral Chen was biased in favor of her subordinates. Admiral, isn't it true that you would do anything to protect the sailors under your command, even if they were guilty? Admiral Chen's response was immediate and firm. Mr. Sterling, I have court-martialed sailors under my command when they violated military law. I have ended careers when personnel failed to meet our standards. My loyalty is to the truth and to the institution I serve, not to individuals who bring dishonor to the uniform. But you have a personal interest in protecting the reputation of your command. My interest is in ensuring that innocent people are not destroyed by corrupt officials. If Morrison and Rivera were guilty, I would support their prosecution. But they are innocent victims of Detective Webb's corruption. Sterling tried several different approaches, but Admiral Chen was unshakable. Her 25 years of experience had prepared her for hostile questioning, and she answered every attack with calm professionalism. The most damaging moment for the defense came when Sterling made the mistake of challenging Admiral Chen's investigation methods. Admiral, you're not a trained police detective. How can you be sure your investigation was thorough and accurate? Admiral Chen smiled slightly. Mr. Sterling, I have conducted military investigations in combat zones where people's lives depended on getting the facts right. I have access to federal investigative resources and some of the most skilled intelligence professionals in the world. I assure you our investigation was both thorough and accurate. She leaned forward slightly. More importantly, everything we discovered has been verified by federal law enforcement agencies. The Naval Criminal Investigative Service, the FBI, and other agencies have confirmed our findings. Sterling realized he had made a serious mistake in challenging Admiral Chen's competence. He quickly moved to end his cross-examination. No further questions, Your Honor. As Admiral Chen stepped down from the witness stand, the impact of her testimony was clear to everyone in the courtroom. She had not just presented evidence against Webb. She had shown the jury what true leadership and integrity looked like. creating a stark contrast with the corrupt detective sitting at the defense table. Webb watched her walk back down the aisle, her bearing as confident and dignified as when she had entered. He knew that his case was lost. Admiral Chen had destroyed any remaining credibility he might have had with the jury. But Admiral Chen was not finished yet. As she reached the back of the courtroom, she turned and walked to the section where Morrison and Rivera's families were sitting. She spoke quietly to Morrison's wife and Rivera's parents, offering them the support and reassurance that their loved ones would be vindicated. The jury was out for less than 2 hours. In complex criminal cases, quick deliberations usually meant one of two things. Either the evidence was so overwhelming that the verdict was obvious, or the case was so weak that dismissal was the only option. Given everything that had happened during the trial, everyone in the courthouse knew which way this was going. Detective Marcus Webb sat at the defense table, his hand shaking slightly as he tried to drink a cup of water. The confident, arrogant cop who had arrested Morrison and Rivera was gone, replaced by a broken man who knew his life was about to change forever. His lawyer, Robert Sterling, had stopped trying to offer reassurance. The evidence had been too strong, and Admiral Chen's testimony had been devastating. Admiral Chen remained in her seat in the front row, her presence a constant reminder of the institutional integrity that Webb had tried to destroy. She had not moved from her position since testifying, and her steady, calm demeanor provided strength to Morrison and Rivera, who sat nervously at the defense table waiting for their vindication. The families of both sailors filled several rows behind them. Morrison's wife held their young son, while Rivera's elderly parents sat holding hands, praying for justice. They had watched their loved ones be dragged through a legal nightmare because they had witnessed corruption and refused to stay silent. News reporters packed the remaining seats and lined the walls of the courtroom. This case had attracted national attention as a symbol of the battle between institutional integrity and individual corruption. The story of 2 Navy SEALs framed by a corrupt cop had resonated with people across the country. At 3:15 p.m., the bailiff received word that the jury had reached a verdict. Judge Harrison called everyone back into the courtroom, and the tension was immediate and electric. Webb looked pale and sick as he stood to face the jury. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Harrison asked. The jury foreman, a middle-aged man who had served in the Army years earlier, stood up. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of drug possession against defendant Jake Morrison, how do you find?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." Morrison's wife burst into tears of relief. Admiral Chen allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. "On the charge of drug possession against defendant Alex Rivera, how do you find?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." "On the charge of obstruction of justice against defendant Morrison, how do you find?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." "On the charge of obstruction of justice against defendant Rivera, how do you find?" "Not guilty, Your Honor." The courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Morrison and Rivera embraced each other, their ordeal finally over. Their families rushed forward to hug them, tears of joy streaming down their faces. But Judge Harrison was not finished. "Ladies and gentlemen, while this jury has found the defendants not guilty of all charges, I want to address some serious issues that have been raised during this trial." The courtroom quieted as the judge continued. "The evidence presented in this case suggests that Detective Webb engaged in serious criminal conduct, including planting evidence, taking bribes, and systematically targeting military personnel. I am referring this case to federal prosecutors for immediate investigation." Judge Harrison turned toward Webb, who was still standing at the defense table. "Detective Webb, while you are not on trial here today, I want you to know that your conduct as described in this courtroom is a disgrace to law enforcement and to the community you swore to serve." Webb's lawyer tried to object, but the judge held up his hand. "I am also ordering a complete investigation into Detective Webb's arrest record, with particular attention to cases involving military personnel. Any convictions based on his testimony or evidence he gathered should be reviewed immediately." As court was adjourned, federal agents who had been waiting in the hallway moved forward to arrest Webb. Agent Martinez from NCIS stepped forward with a warrant. "Marcus Webb, you are under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, civil rights violations, and obstruction of justice under federal law." As the handcuffs clicked around Webb's wrists, he looked up to see Admiral Chen watching him. Their eyes met for a moment, and in her steady gaze he saw the consequences of his choices. He had tried to destroy 2 innocent men to protect his corruption, and now he was facing federal prison while they walked free. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Martinez continued as she read Webb his Miranda rights. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The corrupt detective who had falsely arrested others was now being legitimately arrested himself. As Webb was led away in handcuffs, Admiral Chen stood and approached Morrison and Rivera. The 3 of them stood together in a moment of quiet dignity while cameras flashed around them. "I'm proud of both of you," Admiral Chen said quietly. "You faced this ordeal with honor and courage, just as you faced everything else in your military careers." Morrison spoke first. "Admiral, thank you for believing in us when everyone else was ready to assume we were guilty." "Thank you for fighting for us," Rivera added. "A lot of commanders would have let us face this alone." Admiral Chen shook her head. "That's not how the Navy works. We take care of our own, especially when they're innocent victims of corruption." She turned to face the cameras and reporters who were pressing forward for statements. "Today justice was served. 2 innocent sailors have been vindicated, and a corrupt police officer will face the consequences of his actions. But this case represents something larger than just these individuals." Her voice carried the authority that had commanded respect throughout her career. "This case shows what happens when good people stand up to corruption, even when it's dangerous and difficult." Petty Officer Morrison and Chief Petty Officer Rivera could have stayed silent when they witnessed Detective Webb's corruption. Instead, they chose to do the right thing even knowing it might put them at risk. A reporter called out a question. "Admiral, what message does this case send?" "The message is simple. Corruption will not be tolerated no matter who commits it or who they target. The men and women who serve in our military deserve to be protected by honest law enforcement, not persecuted by corrupt officials." Admiral Chen gestured toward Morrison and Rivera. "These sailors have served their country with distinction in combat zones around the world. They deserved better than to be framed by someone who was supposed to protect and serve the community." Another reporter asked about the federal investigation into Webb. "The federal investigation will be thorough and complete," Admiral Chen replied. "We will make sure that every victim of Detective Webb's corruption receives justice. This case may be over, but our work is not done." As the news conference ended, Admiral Chen walked with Morrison and Rivera toward the courthouse exit. The 3 of them moved together with the bearing and confidence that came from knowing they had fought for justice and won. Outside the courthouse, hundreds of supporters had gathered. Military personnel from the nearby base, family members, and community members who supported honest law enforcement cheered as the 3 emerged from the building. Morrison's wife rushed forward to embrace her husband, their young son jumping into his arms. Rivera's parents hugged their son tightly, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces. Agent Martinez approached Admiral Chen as the families celebrated. "Admiral, the federal case against Webb is going to be extensive. We'll need Morrison and Rivera to testify about what they witnessed behind Tony's bar. They'll be available whenever you need them," Admiral Chen replied. "These men understand their duty and they'll see this through to the end." Martinez nodded. "Based on our investigation, Webb was taking money from drug dealers for at least 8 months. He protected their operations, warned them about raids, and arrested innocent people to keep his statistics high. The federal charges will likely result in 20 years in prison. Good. His victims deserve justice." As Admiral Chen watched Morrison and Rivera reunite with their families, she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. These were the moments that made her career meaningful. Not the awards or promotions, but the times when she could protect good people from injustice and ensure that integrity triumphed over corruption. The case became a landmark example of what happened when institutional integrity faced individual corruption. Admiral Chen's decision to personally involve herself in the case and testify in court sent a message throughout the military and law enforcement communities that corruption would not be tolerated. Webb was eventually sentenced to 18 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to multiple charges including racketeering, civil rights violations, and conspiracy. The judge at his sentencing said that his systematic targeting of military personnel was particularly reprehensible because it attacked the very people who had sworn to defend the country. Rico. Martinez received a reduced sentence in exchange for his cooperation, but still served 3 years in federal prison. His drug operation was dismantled, and several other corrupt officials who had been protecting him were also prosecuted. Morrison and Rivera returned to their duties with SEAL Team 7, their careers unblemished by the false charges. They were both promoted within a year, recognition of their professionalism and integrity throughout the ordeal. The case also led to broader reforms in police oversight and accountability. Morrison and